Hello everybody and welcome back to Nerdy Miniatures, and in today's video we'll be working on building up my 2000 point Sylvaneth army, working with our spearhead as we paint my Lady of the Vines. Just like my spearhead, we'll be painting this figure in a cherry blossom theme, so without further ado, let's get into the video. To begin, let's look at who the Lady of the Vines is. The Lady of the Vines is the literal hand of Alarielle, cut from the goddess's wrists and grown into a towering war leader. She holds true to the Everqueen's summery war aspect, even in times of wintry melancholy. Her song of wrath echoing through the very realm roots, and has slain countless foes of the Sylvaneth with her lashing whip limbs and her holy spear, Cornothiel Wrath. Even when she is cut down, the Lady of the Vines is regrown anew to punish the enemies of Gyron, as inevitable as the turning of the seasons. Safe to say, this lady is pretty cool. Now we have covered that, let's talk about how we painted her. To start, I began by covering the entire figure using grey sear spray paint, followed by a coat of Dryad Bark. This took a while to do, as there were lots of parts of this figure that required multiple layers to make sure it was all evenly covered. After a while of letting that dry, it was time to start dry brushing. I built this up in layers, starting with a layer of Sylvaneth Bark, but this didn't really have the colour payoff that I wanted, so I ended up going in with a layer of Gorthor Brown, and this was much better. Now that was dry, it was time to start working on adding the green to the figure. Using Elysian Green, I dry brushed this over the most central parts of the figure, as well as over any bends or joint that the figure has, and wrapped it around the vines. Now it was time to start adding the glowing effect to the figure. To do this, I used Moot Green and a small brush. I applied this to the eyes, as well as the spiral in her chest, and eventually the swirls in her legs. Whilst that dried, I moved on to her weapon. For this, I painted the handle of the spear using Baneblade Brown, sweeping a couple of thin coats over it until I was satisfied with the colour payoff. Hanging off this girl are a couple of bugs. To paint these, I started by painting them with the base of Nightlord's Blue, which is a beautiful navy, and I touched up their wings later on using Lothen Blue. Off camera, using grey sear, I painted the skulls that peek out of her leaf robes, ready to finish them off later. Whilst that dried, I moved on to adding the pink elements to this figure. Using Screamer Pink, I applied this to every leaf, front and back, to make sure they were all fully covered. Leaving that to dry, I moved back to the skulls to finish them off. Using Skeleton Horde, I covered each skull with a couple of layers, making them look old and aged after being attached to the Lady of the Vines for so long. After all, these are some of her fallen enemies. Then, using the same colour, I swept it over the handle of her weapon, again to create an aged look. Now moving on to the blade. Using the pale blue colour shade Blue Horror, I swept multiple layers over the blade until I was happy with the colour payoff. Using Lothen Blue, I then stippled the paint over the blade to give it more of a glowing effect. Off camera, I painted the orc that the Lady of the Vines is crushing. This wasn't intentional, I was experimenting with colours until I was satisfied with the colour payoff, so I apologise. But for the vines, I used the same colour I used for the lady, which were Dryad Bark and Gorthor Brown. For the orc itself, I painted his body using Elysian Green and swept the shade Reikland Fleshshade over him to give his body a more grubby effect. For his eye, I applied Abaddon Black. Now to make this sight gorier, I applied some blood. To do this, I used the technical paint Blood for the Blood God and dripped it down the figure and into a pool at the base of his head. After I finished painting the orc, I painted the base using the technical paint Stirland Mud, as usual. And that is it for the Lady of the Vines. I used the same fake foliage as we purchased from Amazon to finish off the cherry blossom design. This was a cool figure to paint, and I look forward to seeing what she can do in battle. Down in the description you will find 2 links. The first to Mr. Nerd's channel, so if you enjoy MMOs and action RPGs, then might I recommend looking at that. And if you enjoy all things fantasy lore on topics like Tolkien, Game of Thrones, Warhammer and The Witcher, then might I recommend having a look at my channel. Anyway, that'll be it from me today. Have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. And as always, peace out.